I remember him telling me at like our first session together, the moment you walk in the locker room, they're looking to replace you. Well, that's chaos and that's chaotic, and there's really nothing you can do about that. You acknowledge it, you know it exists, and then you control the variables that you can. You put in your time, you put in your effort, you show up early, you leave late, you work hard.
Welcome to the second Plan A. Why do I do that?
Welcome.
Welcome to the second Plan A podcast, where we take hard-earned lessons from the maths and convert them into tools for navigating life's challenges. I'm Amber Hoover. I'd rather stick to the plan.
Welcome. I'm Ryan Hoover, and chaos is my safe space.
Aw, I thought of that. He actually liked it or something.
And she just ruined it, so I'll never do that again.
Well, I'm going to cut that part out. So today we are moving to our second Plan A. On this episode, we are using leadership principles and team dynamics to break down what it takes to thrive in uncertainty. We'll discuss what a chaos agent is and why the order of those two words matter. Are you ready to create some stability through the chaos of this episode?
Yep, I am ready.
Boy, did I write that line before the chaos started. Holy cow. Getting on today was some work.
Yes.
All right. At least a decade ago, you introduced me to Darren Hardy and his Darren Daily series, if you remember that. Mm-hmm. So Darren Hardy was the publisher of Success magazine for a long time. He has an incredible entrepreneurial spirit and background. And in one video that really struck with me, he looks straight into the camera, into my soul.
Okay.
And says, "Stop trying to control everything, you freak." And I was like, oh, yep, there it is. So you know this, but for anyone else, I like to control.
Okay, how long ago was this?
That I heard the video?
Yeah.
I was in at least an apartment, so 6 or 7 years ago.
Okay. So you heard it, you acknowledged it. And you recognized it as a thing that you struggle with. And how has that gone?
I've made improvements. I still try to control everything, though.
Okay.
I mean,
just asking.
I've recognized where I need to let go a little bit, except that life is inherently uncertain and that things change. It's still difficult to change with them.
Okay. Carry on.
So I like to know what's happening and when, and I like to get things done that need to get done, because then I know they got done because I did them.
Mm-hmm.
Which,
So you would do well in the new Elon Musk government.
Putting in my resume now. Anyway.
Send in your email. 5 things you did this week.
Fortunately, I don't know. That's not how life works. So part of life and finding stability in life, accepting that life is uncertain. Apparently, if I ever start to accept that uncertainty, I'll be able to adapt quicker, even find new opportunities.
Okay.
This is the idea. But anyway, this is where the idea of a chaos agent starts coming into play, yeah?
Yes.
Sweet. Talk to me about that. And
okay.
Why I'm not one, why I got the words backwards.
Yeah, you're a little more agent of chaos than a chaos agent.
Sounds cool.
No, let's start there. An agent of chaos. I think the best example of this that people can like immediately visualize is the Joker from Batman.
Yeah, agent of chaos.
Especially if you look at the Heath Ledger version. There's a scene where Alfred is talking to Bruce, and Alfred says, some people just want to watch the world burn. And that's kind of what an agent of chaos is. They create chaos for the sake of just watching the world burn. Yeah, looking to just disrupt for the sake of disrupting, not disrupt for the sake of exacting, meaningful, productive change. And so for me, a chaos agent is someone that isn't afraid of chaos, doesn't shy away from it, maybe thrives in it, to some degree, but they do everything that they can on the front end to mitigate the inevitable chaos that will come through life. They control variables where they can. They don't worry about the things that they can't control. They have multiple contingencies in place and still recognize that none of them may cover whatever happens. You saw this, I think, a great recent example, and recent, being a relative term, during the COVID pandemic. You saw people that fell apart,
Yeah.
like melted down, like fighting people over toilet paper in stores. And you saw people that made adjustments in real time and did that many times over during that time period. I think it's a really good recent example that people can kind of connect to. And there were, I think there were agents of chaos during that time too. People just looking to kind of take advantage of a situation and make it worse. But
Stir the
the people,
pot
yes,
and yeah.
but the people that were chaos agents, they did okay. They may not have been thriving, but they did okay. They weren't running around chicken with their heads cut off. They weren't chicken little. The sky is falling.
Yeah.
They recognized that there were things they could control and things that they couldn't, and where they could exact meaningful change, they did, and they adjusted, and life went on.
It's interesting that you went straight to that because so my research was more on the business development
Hmm.
side of this, and I feel like you tackled more of the life side and fighting side. But COVID is probably ubiquitous between the two.
Yeah,
It was mentioned as something that tested everybody's definition of what life looks like.
yeah,
So even somebody who hadn't really encountered a lot of uncertainty in life had done a really good job of mitigating variables and was relatively prepared and planned out was caught off guard by
yeah.
this.
But even that, like being caught off guard by it is one thing. No,
Everybody's caught off guard, I
yes.
guess. It's whether you
It's
that's how you react.
it's yes. Am I going to be a victim of the chaos, or am I going to revel in it? It's maybe not quite the right word, but see opportunity in it, and
Right.
if you look at it from a business standpoint, I mean, we had two standalone training centers that we couldn't use, that the government basically said that we were part of the problem, and you can't exist in this time. And within a couple of days, we were on Zoom and we were running multiple classes a day, and, thinking about what the next thing was going to look like.
Yeah.
It would have been really easy. I mean, I saw and I heard people that, just, I hate to say gave up, but kind of gave up.
They
They
did. They
looked
took it
at,
as their exit
yeah,
and
they looked at this as an overwhelming kind of thing, and there's nothing I can do about it. And I have no control over these 10 things, and they didn't go looking for things that maybe they did have control over and they could do something about. You mentioned teams as part of this, and I've had the fortune to be a part of a lot of good, strong teams. I've been a part of some teams that were less successful, and maybe had some chances at being great but didn't quite materialize. And I saw again some of that in COVID, where I was part of what I thought was kind of a team environment, where once things got hard and tough and chaotic, some people just could not handle it, and they bailed. Another the other thing that immediately came to my mind when you said something about teams was, and this came up to me for a couple of reasons. One, I found out yesterday that Shaq Thompson, who has been with the Carolina Panthers for, I don't know, 10 or 12 years, had been released
oh
from the
geez,
team.
that sucks.
Yeah, I mean, that's the business. It's how it
Yeah.
goes. And Shaq was kind of my last real tie to the team. I think Coach Rivera started sometime around 2011, and I had a few years where I was pretty involved. We were at the stadium twice a week, and I got a chance to work with a lot of great people. Coach Rivera, his wife Stephanie, his daughter Courtney. At the time, the defensive coordinator was Sean McDermott. He's now the head coach for the Buffalo Bills. I got to work with him. Joe Ken, Big House, was kind of instrumental in a lot of that happening. his assistant Rashad at the time. And then the players that I got to work with, Greg Olson, Charles Johnson, KK Short, F.A. Obata. I hate to start naming because I know I'm going to forget. I did write a couple down, so maybe that'll help me.
He's a cool story. We should talk more about him on one of these podcasts.
Yeah, for sure. Mario Addison. And then I got to meet some families. Reese Williams, who is D'Angelo's wife, and Natalie Khalil, who is Ryan's wife. And I bring all that up because just in that number of people, you tell 10 or 12 or whatever, they made up a 53-person roster with a massive coaching staff. And you think of that as a team where there's a lot of individuals happening. And I learned a lot from Coach Rivera and Coach Ken and Coach McDermott about kind of how to manage all of that just by me watching them, listening to them. We'd do a session, get to sit around and chat and whatever. And you're looking at trying to, at the highest level, trying to manage a whole lot of stuff. And a lot of it's out of your control. You talk about chaos from one week to the next. You have injuries, you have GMs and owners that may decide to trade a player, cut a player, bring a player in that you don't really have any control over. My first NFL client, who I just started working with again, James Anderson, he's now competing in long drive stuff. I remember him telling me at like our first session together, the moment you walk in the locker room, they're looking to replace you. Well, that's chaos and that's chaotic, and there's really nothing you can do about that, but you acknowledge it. Yeah. You know it exists, and then you control the variables that you can. You put in your time, you put in your effort, you show up early, you leave late, you work hard. Look, especially in that environment, the thing that you can control is I'm not going to let anyone outwork me.
Yeah.
They can bring in whoever they want, but I'm going to do my best. And in a team where chaos is kind of like built in, the chaos agents, I think, are the ones that thrive, that end up in Pro Bowls. And, inside of 4 years, I think they were at the Super Bowl, and they went from a losing team to a Super Bowl team in about 4 years. So there's definitely something to, I think, high achievers being chaos agents, especially in a team environment.
That goes back to our topic. We were looking at confronting uncertainty and whether you view it as a challenge versus a threat. That language, that wording, that understanding really matters because, you're in that group dynamic where you are fighting for your job every second.
Right.
You can see that as a threat and it's going to weigh on you, or you see it as a challenge and it pushes you and it drives you.
Yeah. That kind of, just that little bit of, it's not really semantics. And I know people like, oh, that's just semantics, but semantics matter. The meanings of words matter, but it's more of a mindset. It's the idea of, if I see something as a threat, then my actions will be driven by that, which will be caustic to me. I'll spend time and energy and effort on things that I can't really control. It'll eat away at me from the inside out. It will, and then eventually, as it works its way out, it will manifest itself in ways that no longer allow me to be a part of a team environment.
Yeah.
Whereas if I see something as a challenge, then I am forced, for lack of a better term, to step my game up, to be a better teammate, to be a better model for newer players coming in, to work on my strength and conditioning, to spend more time in the video room, to go and find people like me where, I can enhance this one tiny little thing in my skill set. It's just a different mindset, a different mentality. I think people that can do that can see in this context, the chaos as a challenge as opposed to a threat. Because a lot of times you see chaos and it's you deem it a threat, then not only do you not take the right actions, but maybe you don't do anything. You cower, you turtle up, you quit, you give up. And, assuming you're there for a reason in the first place, well, there's no way that I achieved that goal now.
It's so difficult in a team because you do have your individual performance that matters, but it's got to be for the greater good. Yes, it's for yourself and your development, but it's for you to apply to the team so that as a group we're better.
Yes. And that's in certain environments, especially high achieving environments, that's very hard to do. And that's where leadership really, really matters. I've constantly been kind of in awe of what I was able to witness at the stadium on a weekly basis, and having to, because even on the coach level, let's say you're the head coach of an NFL team, and I know I'm harping on this, but it's just top of mind, and it's what kind of I immediately thought about when you brought this
Well,
up.
it's a structured organization
But
too, so
yes,
apply it to life and work, and yeah.
So if you look at like the head coach, well, it's really not much different than the players. You're responsible for managing all these coaches, all these coordinators, all these players. But at the same time, those coordinators are also nipping at your heels for your job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They
are the most likely to be promoted should you be moved out. And so it was a really interesting dynamic for me to kind of be able to work through and live through and watch. And it's probably something that I got more out of than I deserved to. It lasted longer than I would have ever imagined. And a lot of those guys are going on to do some really cool stuff. Greg Olson's won an Emmy now. Charles and KK are kind of business moguls, and I think Ryan Khalil is got a production company, and it's just been it's. But that's a good example again of guys that I think at a high level were able to recognize, look, this is a short run, in life.
In life, in the grand scheme of things.
I could not have any direction after that. I could spiral out of control. I could recognize, well, this is my next chaotic challenge, or it's a threat that, man, I don't have this NFL thing anymore. And now what?
Yeah. So we've looked pretty heavily at leadership and teams and the dynamics within. Mostly you focused on it from this football structure because that's just, it was a good tie-in. And I want to look at it now. I'm going to use the 5 dysfunctions of a team, which was set up, characterized by Patrick Lencioni. Is that how you say that? Do you know?
Yeah, and I hate to do this again, but I have some Lencioni books, and the person that turned me on to Lencioni was House.
Oh,
Joe Ken. He's the one that I just happened to see a bunch of his books in his office one day, and we got talking about it. So
interesting. Well, but good leadership is good leadership. Whatever you're leading, at whatever age, at whoever's under you, and so that makes sense. Lencioni worked primarily in management consulting firms. That doesn't have anything to do with football, and yet he saw the benefit of probably these types of structures and how he laid it out. So the 5 dysfunctions of a team, to lay them out, are absence of trust, fear of conflict, lack of commitment, avoidance of accountability, and inattention to results. And I think a lot of this, obviously, there's the business world. A lot of it parallels into life, and even goes as far as to parallel into building a chaos agent through building up our self-defense practitioners, the people in our centers, the people training with us, so that they have the ability to think for themselves.
Yes.
And they're not their own dysfunction within themselves.
Right.
So if we go back to that first one, absence of trust.
Yep.
Some tactics for developing trust are promoting open communication and even modeling vulnerability yourself.
Yeah.
And I think you do this really well from a coaching standpoint.
Yeah. And I will say, I think this is one that maybe I struggled with early on in my career as a business owner, having maybe the kind of trust that I needed to have in the people around me.
Were you trying to control everything?
I don't know that was it. I mean, probably. I mean, at the end of the day, it's me.
Yeah.
I mean, if it all falls apart, that's on me.
Right.
So to some degree, when you're at the top, that's kind of how it goes. But I think it was less that and more that, I didn't have the mechanisms. I didn't have the experience to be able to let other people in probably the way that I should have.
Right.
To have those conversations about, whatever it was, the open lines of communication that needed to happen to really thrive and prosper especially in a small business environment where you've only got a handful of people, and so you're only dealing with a handful of personalities. But when you're only dealing with a handful, if just one or two is not, working on all cylinders, that's a huge problem. If you've got a company of 300 or 400 and you've got one or two that are a little out of whack, it's negligible.
Right. I'm going to take that even on a smaller scale. You as the coach, the leader of the class, the leader of the room, um, in terms of promoting open communication, not so much asking for questions because that's not quite what we're talking about in this case, but giving students the room to explore and not just this is what I said, this is what you have to do.
Yeah.
And then standing there staring at them, waiting for them to do exactly that.
Yeah.
Giving them some freedom to work and figure things out and know that they're not going to get, obviously you can take it to an extreme, but working within the confines of what we're doing, there's an open line of working through it on your own.
Right. Well, and I think, to expand on that, I think in our world, we're talking about especially self-defense, fighting, whatever, it's important to engender that kind of mindset and mentality, because ultimately, if we're doing our jobs properly, we're creating a whole lot of chaos agents, because
yes,
self-defense, real world fighting is going to be chaotic. And the idea that we would create these syllogistic kind of thinkers where
that was syllogistic, put it in your Hoover dictionaries.
If this then that, which is the way that martial arts and a lot of reality based systems kind of operate. The problem is that's not the way life operates. It's not the way violence works. And so if you are operating in a way where you've got this giant 40-pound manual and it has the step-by-step moves that you're going to do, it has the common problems and the frequently asked questions and whatever, and then as soon as it falls outside of that, you haven't prepared people for the second plan A, the what next. So they don't operate well in chaos. They don't operate well in a dynamic, violent encounter. And so I think a lot of that starts with how you're running your class, how you're coaching people, how you're raising your kids, how you deal with whatever. You've seen that, and we've probably touched on this before. You've seen this just in the way our animals are,
Yeah.
The way that my dogs are unflappable. They are unfazed by anything. And you got to see this firsthand through bringing up Boo and bringing up the cat, Obi. That cat is
agent of chaos.
Yeah, well, yes. But there's nothing timid about it.
No.
It hasn't been sheltered. It hasn't been coddled, Boo is very affectionate, but she is unbothered by anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so much of that has to do with just the way that you approach life in general. I recognize that it's not always going to be A, B, C, D.
So in this next section, in terms of developing trust, whether it be trust for student to coach or trust as the student themselves, so that they can go into that self-defense situation, that chaotic world, and know that they're going to find the answer. The other side of this is having a model of vulnerability.
Yeah.
And as a coach and as we teach coaches, we encourage them to not be afraid of saying they don't know something.
Yeah.
And it leads into this be curious mindset that can really help you improve, because part of chaos and uncertainty is an opportunity to find a new thing, find a new path, a new direction. And if you're so stuck on the way you're going and what you're doing, you're not going to see that.
Right.
So it's okay not to know.
Yeah. And I mean, the truth is more often than not, you're not going to know. Like if you just think about the infinite amount of knowledge and information that exists on the planet, the odds are we're not going to know but a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of that information. And when we're going into especially something new, there should be no expectation of us knowing things. But we feel like for whatever reason, and obviously like who you are and what the context is may dictate that some. But like I would go into guitar lessons with absolutely no idea about anything. My guitar lessons were from Phoebe and Friends,
Old lady.
Yeah. So, but I shouldn't go into that thinking anything otherwise,
right.
And so as a coach, you want to make sure that people understand it's okay to be that way.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it should be that way.
That's how we go into things, is we don't know, and that's okay.
We should. I mean, that's really the coach side. That's why we exist. We are here to coach you through a thing that is not your thing.
Hmm.
It's our thing.
Hmm.
We're going to help it become your thing.
So as it becomes your thing, that's when we move into this next dysfunction of a team of sorts, fear of conflict.
Yeah.
And again, this can, from a bad place, this can be a little bit much when we're talking about being on the coaching floor. But for the most part, we do want students to ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
Why this? Why not that? To the degree that they understand.
Yep.
Last week you taught us to do this thing, but this week we're talking about this.
Yep.
You know, what's the difference? And so if any time a question comes up, you give it an F and you shut it down,
right,
that doesn't go very well. But
yep,
we do want to be able to reward people for thinking, putting these things together and coming towards us.
yes, yeah. It's again in the context we're talking about. There's an infinite number of variables. There's an infinite number of ways that a violent encounter could go. And so I often say, look, we're looking at an option, not necessarily the option, because I want people to understand that there's going to be freedom in how they respond to these problems, because we cannot begin to predict all of the chaos that's going to come our way.
Right.
And so to truly build like chaos agents, they have to go in with that understanding. They have to go in with the knowledge that you're not going to know it all. You're going to seek out the information when and where you can, but then have the freedom to problem solve based on what you have learned and what the principles are that drive that.
Well, that kind of starts moving us into a little bit of game theory as well as a principle, where we operate, whether it's literally playing a game or in life or when dealing with your spouse or your boss. We have a heuristic in mind of what to expect and how people react to things and what the likely outcome is going to be. And then we work in a way given what we expect for this person. Or because we know that they're figuring out, in like a fighting context, if we know that they like to throw kicks, and so every time they kick I'm going to punch, every time they kick I'm going to punch, and then I mix it up, I mix my moves. I know, based on what I was expecting from them, how to deal with that situation.
Yeah.
And so there starts to become, you have to balance the heuristic of, I know what to expect and I have an idea of how they're going to respond, with, if they respond the way I'm expecting, great. But if they don't, I'm still going to figure it out. I'm going to work in real time.
Well, and as a chaos agent, you are planning for a certain set of things that are going to happen, but then you're also recognizing the most likely contingencies, the most likely problems that will arise, and mitigating them as much as you can. You know, so in like a sparring context, like what you were talking about, if I know going in, look, this person has really good hands, you know, I'm going to do what I can to shut that down before they're able to make it a problem for me. But then I also have to understand, well, if all of a sudden I start shutting down their hands, and then they let me know that they're actually a better kicker than they are a puncher, they just haven't seen the need to do that yet, then I need to recognize that it's okay. You know, I'm just because I was thinking in one certain way doesn't mean that that's what I have to stick with.
Stick with. That's me. I like sticking with where what I'm doing, where I'm going. My switching cost is a little bit higher, but I get there.
Yeah, I'm not super attached to a way or a thing, or, you know, for better or worse. And, you know, I'm sure there's a for worse in some of those instances. But I recognize, I think, and I think I did this pretty early on, that no matter how constant something is, eventually it will change, it will morph, it will evolve, or, you know, regress. And if it doesn't, then it becomes Blockbuster. It becomes, you know,
Yeah.
Redbox or whatever.
I can't remember if I've told this story on the podcast, but I was at the dog park one day. This is when I first graduated college. I moved down here for a job, got a dog.
A long time ago.
Basically yesterday. And I was there with a war veteran, and he was there with his dog, and we were just sitting hanging out, and the dogs were running around. And he said, you know, at some point, everything you believe right now is going to change. And I mean, religion, finance, politics, kind of rattled off a bunch of things. And some of those had already changed for me through college. But then some of them I was like, no, I've believed that my whole life. And I'm here in my early 20s. So of course now I finally know it all. Got out of the teenage years and
Yeah.
actually, got my degree to hang on the wall. Like I got this. And damn it, all of that has changed.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
You just you really, it's life. You have to experience it. There's no shortcut. The more you experience, the more you start understanding other viewpoints, other means, and the more you embrace conflict within yourself
Yeah.
and outside agents, the more you can grow.
Yeah. Well, it's embracing chaos. The Buddhists talk about life as suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm simplifying that like way beyond a Cliff's Notes version or Spark Notes or whatever is going on today. But the idea being, once you recognize that life is suffering, then you're not surprised by it, and you're ready for it, and you can deal with it, and you don't let it kind of drag you down. You don't lament it. You don't stew in it. You recognize, okay, this is part of the process. This is what happens. What am I going to do now? What am I going to do with that? How am I going to make it better? And I see chaos the same way. Once I recognize that chaos is just going to be a part of whatever, work, life, school, all of it, existence.
Yeah.
Then when it happens, I'm not surprised by it. Now I might be surprised by the exact thing that happens, but I recognize at least that something was going to come eventually.
Right. Yeah.
And it will only be my demise if I allow it to be. Again, if we go back to COVID, we very easily could have been game over during that time. It happened to a lot of people in our industry. That was the end for them, and it very easily could have happened to us. And there were certain days that I definitely was like, you know what, I'm not sure this is worth it.
Yeah.
But I would quickly snap out of that, and I think that's because I recognize that this is how life is,
Yeah.
and I saw again this challenge as opposed to this threat.
There's a psychology term called holding, and I think it's been more currently known, like in the zeitgeist, as holding space. I know, but essentially, it's allowing. How am I going to explain this without making Ryan throw up?
You're not.
You're right.
Go ahead. It's fine.
It's allowing for feeling, emotions, responses to be okay, like in the terms of, I hear what you're saying, what you're feeling right now is valid, I understand what's going on, then still helping them take the next step.
Yeah.
Not just stopping at the holding part, but helping them overcome whatever it is. Whether and we can only control so much. If I feel like you were angry at me and that's why you weren't texting me back, I might feel upset or sad, and somebody who's holding for me is allowing me to feel those things, but then also guiding me in the way of, well, have you asked? Do you know that's why?
Yeah.
And allowing me to work through it and work out of it, because there are going to be plenty of times in life you don't text me back. And if every time I assume it's because you're mad at me, and then that allows me to get mad at you, and then you come home and I'm angry and you don't understand, you just had a horrible day and your phone died, why am I so mad at you now? And
this sounds way too specific. Anyway,
it might be top of mind conversation.
Anyway, yeah, I mean, I'm my problem with this is, and this is with most things, the holding space crap, is your feelings aren't always valid. Like they're just not. I don't care what anybody says.
But you are feeling it,
which is fine. That doesn't make that feeling valid.
Okay. What term?
Like how does it? You feeling a thing? Why does that make it valid just because you feel it?
It's just understanding that, okay, this is how you feel.
Okay.
Communicating that, because sometimes that's all that somebody wants is somebody to know what they're feeling.
Okay.
Not you, of course, but
No, definitely not.
people.
Okay, this sounds like a whole my truth thing.
I don't. I think it can be that.
Right,
I
that's
think
what I'm
it, but
saying.
it's not always.
Well, nothing is always.
Did I mention that? Um, when you yearn for predictability and certainty, it also leads to like binary thinking. Anyway, but there is a space for holding, but it doesn't exist on its own. It's like if you tell somebody, okay, here's this power slap. Like, okay, this is a tool to use, but it's not the only thing that you're going to do. Maybe there's a chance you knock them out and you're good and you run away, but you might have to follow up with more things. So holding is a tool.
If you say
No?
so.
Yeah? Okay. We'll see. Let's go on to lack of commitment as a dysfunction of a team environment. Things to overcome that include celebrating achievement, tracking progress, and involving the whole team in decision making. That one's a little different for an individual in like the self-defense space. But we talk a lot about gap and gain on this podcast, being able to recognize how far you've come and where you are to motivate you to keep going.
Yeah. All right. This is another one that I think over time, I hopefully have gotten better at. I definitely was not awesome with this. And I'm not saying I'm awesome with it now, but I definitely was not great at it early on. I'm going to blame my generation to a degree. I mean, I come from a generation of people where it's just like, you just do what needs to be done. There's a, there's a scene and Mad Men obviously is a little bit before my time, but there's a scene in Mad Men where two of the primary characters are kind of having an argument. It's Don Draper and Peggy Olson, and Peggy is basically talking about feeling undervalued. That he doesn't show gratitude, he doesn't say thank you, he doesn't pat her on the back, whatever. And Don says that's what the money is for. And
That's what the paycheck is.
that's kind of the upbringing that I come from. It's like, look, you show up, you do your job, you get paid for it. If you go above and beyond that, then further recognition comes in getting paid more, getting a promotion, whatever. And so the constant validation that seems to be needed is not something that I've been awesome at. I do think that I've gotten better despite what I just sounded like in the past 5 minutes. I'm not saying I like it. I'm saying I've gotten better at doing it.
I agree. You have gotten better.
But it's something that I have to make a real concerted effort at, because it does not come naturally to me at all.
Once when you do make that effort and celebrate achievement, it's just like coaching, telling somebody what they did well so that it sticks in their mind. Good job keeping your hands up. Now they feel good about that. They feel like they've been recognized for being able to do that, and it's going to be easier along the way to continue with that. Right. Getting that buy-in from somebody is important.
Yes.
For leadership, for family, for fighting.
Yep. Agreed. I'm just not I just have not been awesome at it in the past. And I will say, like, I'm probably better at it with certain types of people than I am others. I recognize it in some people, recognize the need for it in some people, and maybe make assumptions that other people don't need it when they actually do.
Well, communication, I hear, is important.
Something like that.
I do, and
sounds dumb.
It's strange having moved from more of a role where there's not really anyone that I'm responsible for. I've moved up to where there are more people that I'm responsible for, and it is a strange, like I when I go to compliment them or thank them, whatever it is, and I know it's been a while or whatever it might be, I do like to say, I still don't see myself in this role, and I have to remind myself that, by virtue of having taught you or brought you up and this, that, and the other, like, you do expect some type of recognition, and I do value you or what you're doing or whatever based on the situation. But it is a weird transition to make. You almost don't notice it. Okay. I'm getting rid of all of that. On to the next one. I lost my train of thought. Avoidance.
You don't ever say that. People won't know. They have no idea. All of this should stay in.
Okay.
Because listen, this goes back to what we were talking about.
Now you're going to really make me keep it all in.
Yes. Because this goes back to what we were talking about earlier. When you're showing some vulnerability, like I've talked about this in videos. I make mistakes in videos. 99 times out of 100, they stay in because I want people to understand, look, this is what I do all day, every day. This is my job. This is who I am. And I still screw it up, you know?
Yeah.
If we want to set examples for the Lucys, the Chevelles, the people that are in our classes and our programs that are still very early in their developmental stages of understanding how life works, I think it's important that they see and understand and recognize that what's always on social media, for example, is not what is truly there. Everything is highly edited and proofed and filtered and whatever. And I think it's not only okay, but it's almost necessary that we exhibit our foibles too. We screw up. Like that just is what it is. Personally, I don't think that you screwed up. You might feel like you lost your place, but it didn't come off that way until you let everybody know that's what happened.
I'm an open book. Well, good. That was a wonderful learning
Except
point.
that you're gonna, edit it out.
No, I'll keep all that in because you just took
Well,
it
I
and
didn't
made a
give you
whole
any
point.
choice.
I know that was rude. I was going to edit it out and put it on my highlight reel.
No, it's good stuff.
It is. And it leads us into our next one, which is avoidance of accountability. But luckily, you make me feel safe and comfortable accepting that sometimes things go right, sometimes things go wrong. And I am a part of that. And I agreed to be on this team. And I am here to be accountable with you.
Yeah. This is one, I think, for me, from my perspective, as somebody that is, for lack of a better term, the leader of 3 different companies, you have no choice but to have some level of accountability.
Yeah.
Now that said, if you allow yourself to, it's really easy to say, well, I told so and so this, or so and so was supposed to do that, or this is that person's job. At the end of the day, I don't care if you're on your business card, next to it says something like owner or president or CEO or boss. It's yours.
Yeah.
And you have to own that.
Well, so I made a note to come to this at the beginning. You said something that made me think of extreme ownership. When we were talking about the control freak side of me, there's a delicate balance, because if I take extreme ownership too far, I'd take away things from people, so that if something goes wrong or isn't done wrong, then I don't have to deal with it later on. That's cheating. That's cutting corners, really.
Well, I mean, that's the issue with almost anything in extreme.
Yeah.
As soon as you start running to one side or the other, you're almost necessarily going to, one, you don't even allow yourself the chance for there being something else. Once I am hard and fast and fixated in one corner wearing one jersey, whatever it is, then I don't allow for anything outside of my bubble. And then we talked about echo chambers and all that stuff previously. I think it's important to have, yes, you got to have accountability, and you got to recognize when maybe you didn't do something the way that you should have done it, or that you should have, maybe done more or maybe done less, maybe said a thing, maybe not said a thing, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But I think in order to do that, you have to have an open mind, which allows you to kind of see more than just your side of it,
Right. Yeah. It's a good point. And I think it's just one of those things where there's no, like how people say work-life balance.
Yeah.
There's no actual balancing point. It's just, you're trying to make those deviations as little as possible, so that you're not all work at one point and life is completely deteriorating underneath you. And so there's this ownership, but willingness to take accountability for others and their activities that we have to balance.
There's going to be days where, it's 10, 12 hours work and very little life. And hopefully somewhere at the end of this ride, it all kind of hashes out a little bit to where it's a little bit more balanced. But it's not like I'm not spending 4 hours a day on this, 4 hours a day on this, 4 hours a day on this, and then getting my, I don't know how many hours that was, but my 8, 10 hours, whatever, of sleeping and eating. That's just not how it goes.
Right. And if that's what you expect it to how to go, and we've talked about expectations on
Then
here,
you are not a chaos agent.
it's not going to go well. All right, our last dysfunction to talk about is inattention to results. This, I feel like we could probably spend a whole podcast on this alone, just in thinking about like jujitsu.
Yeah.
Thinking that you're improving because you're tapping people.
Right.
But you're tapping, 14-year-olds with 4%, BMI.
Yeah. Listen,
Well,
the
yeah,
more
I was about to say.
the more videos I see of kids these days doing things like jujitsu, I'm glad that pretty soon I'm going to be able to say, that I'm the old man and nobody has much expectation from me, because I'm looking around rooms and mats and on videos and I'm like, oh my God, these kids are terrifying.
You're this close to being the old man at the gym in jeans that nobody messes with. I don't care what gym it is. I don't care if it's lifting, fighting, climbing. There's going to be an old man there in jeans, and you just know not
leave
to
him
mess
alone.
with him. Leave him alone. Let him do his thing. And then he's also about to crush whatever your expectations or thoughts were. But yeah, inattention to results in life, business, football coaching, martial arts students.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think if we look at extremes, right? If all I look at is the end, the result, then it's kind of like, okay, but what was the goal? Yeah. What were we trying to accomplish? Did we make inroads there or not? And a lot of times the process, if I don't pay attention to the process, sometimes the process is what really matters. Mm-hmm. But if I don't pay attention to the process, then I don't know how to fix the result, or I don't know how to improve the result, or I don't know how to set my next goal and take the previous results in the previous process and use them to my advantage for the next thing. And doing that in a team is hard, because when you're looking at results, a lot of times that's going to be, whether the results are good or bad, are going to be based on the expectations of the individual. And if you've got multiple people that are part of a team, and you're almost for sure going to have some level of differing expectations, then analyzing the result is going to become that much harder to do. So I think, like, as a chaos agent, being able to frame it on the front end allows us all to kind of have an understanding of what it's going to look like on the back end. A chaos agent is prepared for setting up expectations, recognizing that there's going to be some variance in the expectations, recognizing that if we have this planned outline, there's going to be some things that are going to need to be moved, shifted, eliminated, added, whatever. And if we're communicating all these things to our team, and our team has trust in the process that we are laying out for them, when there is some inevitable thing that doesn't line up with what we're doing happens, and it will, then we're able to look at a result from that lens, that filter. And as a chaos agent, we don't view it as a failure necessarily, or we don't view it as a thing that we just have to wash our hands of and move on. We take it for what it is, and if there's value in it and we can build on that, then we do.
What are some of your, what do you think are some of the biggest cinematic chaos agents? Like, would you consider John Wick a chaos agent?
Yeah. People that, yes. Yeah. That's an interesting question, because I immediately I could think of a few agents of chaos.
Yeah.
On the cinematic side, though, I still think the Joker is probably
one of
the best example that immediately came to mind anyway.
I feel like they're more fun to write for. Like, as somebody developing a character, developing the Joker is so much more fun than
there's no real rules. There's no real limits. Because you're as an agent of chaos, you are truly just trying to
mess things
mess with everybody that you can. There's no restriction, whereas a chaos agent has restriction. I mean, they are working to make the world a better place, and they're going to use chaos to their advantage where they can, but they're not looking to purposely disrupt things just for the sake of doing it, which means that they're going to have to work under certain parameters, you know, and that's where maybe Wick doesn't quite, because
Well, yeah, he doesn't really
he's going
have
to
parameters.
indiscriminately kill whoever he needs to kill, and
yeah.
But I do think that the preparation and the planning that goes into someone like John Wick
The
would fall into
shifting and
that,
the
and being able to
creativity.
adapt in real time, and
Yeah.
be able to move from one weapons platform to another, from one delivery system on the fighting side to another. That falls in line with what in my mind a chaos agent would be or do.
I have no specifics in mind, but I can just see him in different roles. I feel like The Rock usually plays a chaos agent.
Yeah. The other one that just came to mind that I already mentioned, I think Don Draper was a chaos agent. He also may have been an agent of chaos in his personal life.
Yeah.
But when it came to business, he was a chaos agent. As his business partners or his employees or his clients would throw all this weird random stuff at him, I feel like that's where he really was able to shine. You know, the more outlandish kind of problems that presented themselves in conference rooms, the better he became.
So there was a College of Medicine study quote in the article I read, and Stephanie Gorka of Ohio State University was the one in this article. And she said, when we meet with something unexpected, there's an error signal in our mind because we weren't expecting it. It's a mismatch between what we assumed would occur and what our senses tell us. And if you lean into that as a problem, as a threat, it's not going to go well. But that unease, that sense of not knowing, also triggers some beneficial changes, including heightened attention, a better working memory, sensitivity to new information, things that, because you were caught by surprise, because it didn't match what you were expecting, things that you can really use to benefit yourself in your position. And he could do that on a dime in a conference room.
Yeah.
When he pitches something or someone pitches something and the client's like, we don't like that, or this is what we think, he's ready to, he's heightened attention, heightened memory, heightened working processing.
Yeah. And I think on the front end, he has a good enough understanding of human nature and human behavior to recognize that there's something about this pitch that they're not going to get, they're not going to understand, they're not going to quite know what to do with it. And my job is to know that's coming and be able to shift and explain as needed.
Right. Be ready to explain it to them because you know how they're going to view it, or be ready to overcome it.
And I will say too, he was also pretty ready to just move on from it too.
Yeah.
You know, like he had this ability to recognize no matter what I say here, it's not going to change.
Yeah.
And no matter how good I feel about this presentation, doesn't really matter because I'm not the client. And he was able to move on from it. And, I think chaos agents are really good at knowing when to hold them, know when to fold them.
I was about to end that podcast with this if you didn't hit it.
I think that a chaos agent will do everything they can within reason, everything that is feasible, not trading one danger for another, but then recognize when this part of it is over. It's done. It's time to fold them and move on to the next hand.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right. That's our look at Mad Men, but also thriving in uncertainty.
And Kenny Rogers and the Carolina Panthers. And
yep.
Lencioni.
If you enjoyed this discussion, please leave us 5 stars. Follow, share, subscribe, engage with us. We really enjoy doing this, guys. We really need your help to make it successful, to keep it going, to pass it on to people who need these conversations. So if you got anything out of this, please share it, send it to your friends. If you didn't enjoy this podcast, overreact by commenting on anything we've ever posted about how terrible it is, that's fine too. Thanks for listening to Second Plan A, and we look forward to growing with you next time.
Thanks, everybody.